Hey yo, my Hexagore stands, it's Man Sant, and I had to just make this video even in the midst of vacation here, because there is something just a little too special. And that's a Hexagore deck that actually functions, and might be the deck I take to PQs this year. Let's give it a look.
Wow, Ethan, great moves. Keep it up. Proud of you.
So when I was first making this video, I had an insane record of 11-1 before hitting a bit of a loss streak, but I'm about 20 games in and can safely say that this is definitely the best Hexagore deck I've ever played. Now, while Dynasty didn't release any support for this archetype, I finally just spent the time on a dedicated Hexagore build hoping to solve the problem that the deck normally has, which is namely how to make the early game more stable. Now, Hexagore is a great weapon once the recursion engine around it is set up, but the trick is to transition to that point in the game without collapsing from poor early turns. Without Blood Rush Bellows and Mandible Claws, you can lack the ability to spike early damage and get your opponent into must-block situations more quickly. But Hexagore in the recursion package brings inevitable turn cycle breaking damage just a little bit over time. So to smooth over the game plan and fix the early game, I had to find more hands that were as good as Shadow Pup, which is the best card you can see turn 1 and 2. Energy Potion was definitely that fix, because in the early hands of blocking and fill your graveyard, Energy Potion gives you something to do on a 1-card hand that becomes immeasurably valuable as the stakes of the game ramp up with Blood Debt, unlocking higher damage, saving yourself from all red hands or hands that were disrupted, and providing instant graveyard fill all make Energy Potion insanely strong for this deck. The second fix was to add Scar for a Scar. In the League of Levia Discord, we actually had this discussion to find Levia's max damage per hand, and funny enough, throwing in a 0-for-4 go again just slots into basically every turn. But the issue with a normal Blood Rush build is that you can't count on actually being behind on life totals very reliably because you don't know when your damage spikes. And also adding more non-6s to the deck is just really big liability. But with Hexagore, you're accepting that your early turns don't deal that much damage, so Scar for Scar is basically always active, and you have better control over managing your graveyard. Now, the rest of the deck is limited by what cards exist for a heavy Blood Debt game plan, but we've got the basic core of your Double Howl loop, your Dread Engravelings, your Unworldly and Swing Big, and Art of War, because when you choose Go Again on that card, it basically always equals 6 damage due to Hexagore. Now, this deck is definitely in need of more cards in Levia's card pool, since a lot of the blue slots feel like filler, but it's still a lot of fun to play and challenging to master. You can find the sideboard guide in the February link below, but the best thing to do is going to be to learn from some gameplay, so let's take a look. Alright, hey, we're going to actually try to do this all in one take, because I'm just sitting here alone, bored in a hotel room, as I drive an unexpected 6 hours to a different airport since all these holiday flights have been canceled. So if that happened to you all, do apologize for that. It is not fun to go through. I'm living it right now. But we've got our first game here on screen, and it is Brute versus Brute. I thought this one was pretty fun. I actually recorded something like 20 or so games just to try to find like a good spread to show everyone here. And I like this one in particular because I think it really showed what happens when an aggressive deck takes early trades against you and then realizes, holy smokes, I don't actually beat your damage per card anymore. When a Levia deck is throwing up to 4 or more damage per card when these combo pieces in a Hexagore deck line up, like our small 3-card hands, the recursion engine itself, when all that lines up, a deck like Rhinar just does not beat that trade anymore. So even though they might have had a stronger early game, they realize, okay, I just don't win through damage anymore. I need to hope I win through blocking you out and letting you die to Blood Debt. So a deck like Rhinar is actually poised pretty well to just turn every card in their deck into being worth about 3 block, which can be a bit of a hurdle to overcome. You know, dealing more than 12 a turn is definitely something the deck can do easily, but if you're only leaking a couple damage turn by turn, then yeah, the game can just go longer. A longer game tends to mean more issues with Blood Debt, but if you play this Hexagore deck really well, you should have a really strong grip on managing your graveyard, using your recursion pieces to never really be in a losing position because of Blood Debt. And smart arsenal play is another key part of that. So that's what you're seeing here as the game goes on. I'm going to go ahead and throw a very key Go Again attacker in the arsenal. Of course, it's a Dread Screamer. It's pretty much the best one you can ask for. Go Again is a rarity in this deck, but not a rarity for this hand. That's because Scar for Scar is a new thing I'm trying out in Hexagore Levia that actually has just started to solve so many problems for the deck, right? You're already accepting that your early game is not going to be that powerful. For the most part, if you're attacking, it's going to be with like maybe 1 Swing Big or like 1 Shadow Pup, and those cards are great, but they're not going to push a ton of damage. So what do you do then to try to recuperate from the early trades that you were most likely losing to? Well, Scar for Scar is a great way to do that. It's a 0-for-4, which is a standard rate for an aggressively slanted card. It has Go Again, which is a rarity for Levia, so just throwing in an extra 4 per damage cycle is really good. That's not something that she normally gets to do. It also lets you control the graveyard a bit more because you can close the chain if you need to. Go ahead, get that in graveyard, put yourself at 3 if that's what you needed to do. It's just a very versatile card, and in this hand in particular, you see another use case where all of a sudden I drew a hand that really can be aggressive as early as, I believe, turn 3 is when I'll get to play it out. I'm getting to play likely 1, 0 for 4 go again, into maybe another one, depending on how they block, into a swing big. And all of a sudden that becomes a 4-card hand that dealt 16. I mean, that's fantastic. And it's super low effort in this scenario as well, right? I'm not committing to blood debt. I'm also actually benefiting myself by filling the graveyard as well. The one downside to this graveyard fill is that the 3 cards that I'll be playing out don't have blood debt, so they don't necessarily start counting towards the Hexagore push that I'm going to eventually get to. But that's the key word, right? Eventually. That'll always happen. Like, I will just get to 6 blood debt. The deck is jam-packed with so much of it that it will just happen. So the opponent blocked like a little weirdly there for that second Scar for Scar anyway, but whether they blocked it or not, I was probably then going to pivot this turn into rolling Scab Skins, because if I hit, then that's an extra 4 damage anyway due to the Scar for Scar. So this is, I believe, the point where the opponent starts to realize, okay, hold up, that was a 16 damage turn. I don't beat that with my hand. I'm going to just turn to full blocking now. And that's kind of the first mistake they make, because once they've committed to a full block turn and they think that it was effective in any sense, they might try to do it again. And if they try to do it again, that is just adding inevitability to my game plan. You need to actually deal your damage early against a Hexagore deck, or you just don't beat the rate that's upcoming in the game plan, right? So this turn actually went a little bit sideways as well. It wasn't necessarily a damage push, but I was able to throw out this Dread Screamer. My graveyard's super healthy. I can also start ramping up a little bit of blood debt to start activating Hexagore sooner in this game. And I have an E-Pot to drop. And I actually hit Scabs to drop 2 of them. So at this point, I just know the game is pretty unlosable. Like, unlosable. And yeah, the Rhinar's going to get a decent turn out of this. That's a 2-card hand for 9, because he's going to be able to Tunic and then Claw, right? That's a decent hand coming out of him. But I have inevitability in play. I've got double E-Pot. I haven't really set up recursion pieces yet, but I've got a safe arsenal. I've got the ability to start swinging Hexagore, hopefully within like the next 2 banishes. Even depending on how this banish goes with that Boneyard Marauder, because I actually, I believe I do hit. Yeah, I can see the chat here. I did hit on the Scab Skin. So in this scenario, I'm not going to go for the Hexagore swing, because dealing 3 to myself is just not really worth it. This is a matchup where there's not a lot of interaction, so I will have a good chance to throw a new card in my arsenal. And Mark of the Beast is not really that strong of a card anyway. So yeah, I'll make this 3-card hand deal 12 damage. I mean, that's decent, right? It's 4 damage per card is what you're trying to do. And it's letting me cycle out for a fresh arsenal card. And Mark of the Beast, going to go to the banish zone. Puts me at 4 blood debt, so likely 1 more banish gets me to 6, which is the magic number to start taking 0 damage from Hexagore. So we really love this position, even though we're a little bit lower on life from some of the early trades that the Rhinar was taking, right? We're still in a position now that just feels increasingly good as the game goes on. And we have the freedom here, because the Rhinar decided to full block, preserve HP, to go ahead and roll Scab Skins again. And that is something that you really should take the liberty of doing a bunch in this matchup. I mean, I guess that's not particular to this matchup, but in the Hexagore game plan, you cheat so much damage from zones like the banish, from your weapon being a 2 for 6. I mean, those rates are insane. So when you can abuse them, due to a Scabs roll, it's not just the benefit of, oh, I gotta go again, I got an extra action point this turn. It's, oh, I got the ability to push more insane rate out of this action point. So yeah, you do have to be a bit greedy for it, but you're likely not gonna win every game if you don't at least rely a little bit on Scab Skins with this kind of thing. Because even if you, like once per game, turn a 2-card hand of like a blue and a Boneyard into a blue and a Hexagore swing, or sorry, a Boneyard and a Hexagore swing, that's a 2-card hand that dealt 12 damage. That's insane. That's 6 damage per card on that kind of trade, and it's only really going to come from Scabs rolls. So you just got to recognize, like, the Scabs payoff in this kind of deck is just incredible. So hitting that right there was just fantastic for the deck, right? Because I got to start the recursion engine going. The Howl from Beyond got banished. It didn't turn off Blood Debt, but I knew that I had that second action point, which then let me play the Unworldly to go ahead, turn off the Blood Debt into the Graveling. So we're just so happy with this position here. The Rhinar is finally now on the back foot. You know, you can see the life totals just completely flip from that turn cycle, and they're just going to get worse from here. So the Rhinar doesn't likely really have a way back into this game, to be fair. They're going to play it out, and they're going to realize, yeah, we just don't beat this damage anymore. Like, we just don't. The turning point happened, and I even still have Husk up, right? So it's really just always going to be in my control now. So I can start making plays that have a little bit more uncertainty to them. And Art of War is one of those cards that is a bit hard to measure, because you're not always sure what you're going to be drawing. You don't know much more than go again equaling 6 damage because of Hexagore. But in this kind of scenario, I get to play out this Hexagore swing, right? Or I get to play out this Art of War that I knew was going to lead into Hexagore swing. What I didn't know is that it was going to lead into a Howl from Beyond into Endless Maw. This all of a sudden becomes an 18 damage turn. 18 damage off of 4 cards. Like, that's just insane. And I'm resetting the Howl as well, and I'm getting good value out of Hexagore, and I'm even keeping the E-Pod in play. The one bad thing about that is the cards I pitched were quite powerful going through the first cycle here, which was Doomsday and Art of War. I'm really not planning on seeing second cycle this game. I've dealt way too much damage. I got my engine way too set up. So those cards are effectively gone for the match, but that's okay. There's still just so much power in the deck, and there's so much power just sitting right there on the board in Hexagore and the Howl from Beyond. So I realize at this point, maybe I'm rambling a bit too much. I don't really know how to do these voiceovers very well. But one thing to note, right, is the game definitely looks hopeless. So why did I include it? Well, I included it because of that first thing I said, which is, nothing really against the Rhinar player, whether they played this right or not. They did what they could in maintaining a bit more aggression than I was in the early game. They try to pivot, and then this is what happens when you commit to that strategy of, okay, I'll start blocking because I know I just don't beat you damage-wise. And then I thought this game was just a really good demonstration of that. Like, I don't think anything too fancy happens. I don't think the Rhinar really does anything, too special, honestly. The Hexagore deck just does what it wants, and it scares away a deck that can only turn, their hands into less than 4 damage per card. And if that's the case, you just beat it. And actually, you can see a card in here, by the way, that is not in the official deck list that I'm putting out today. That's the Rouse the Ancients. I was toying around with some other card choices in these videos that we're showing, but they all led to the list that I put out in the front of the video. I really do think it is the best way to play this deck. I've put in so many games now. I think at this point it's got to be more than 20, actually. I think I said 20 at first. But yeah, I'm just in love with it. Hexagore has felt really, really good, and it's so unique, and it's such a new way to play Levia. I tinkered with it before, but I tinkered with it more as a sideboard plan, or maybe like a half-dedicated recursion engine. But this deck is really built to just say, to hell with Blood Rush, to hell with spiking games. I'm building for consistency. And believe it or not, Hexagore is it's a pretty consistent game plan. It's not the fastest game plan. You don't really high roll with this deck unless you open with Howl from Beyond, drop E-Pot, Arsenal, pass. If that happens, sure. That's pretty insane. You've got 2 safety nets in play already. You got your recursion and your graveyard fill all in Howl. You've got your energy potion already in play. If that happens, sure. But for the most part, the game doesn't give you those wins. This deck is really, really about just slow control early game, a strong pivot, and then realizing that you are the aggressor. Whether you want to or not, when you have the damage options you do with Howl from Beyond, don't remember the way you played the early game. Don't think back to when you were defensive. Take the wheel and just push on all of the options you have to present the damage you do, because your damage is insane. I don't know if you might have caught it in the beginning, but if you pause on that bit where I wrote down some of the hands that Levia pulls off, you just remember that it is a rarity to consistently push 4 damage per card. That's always the goal, right? And if you look at a deck like Icelander, a top performer in the metagame, a deck that obviously Michael Hamilton did incredibly well with at the World Championship, that deck is pushing 4 damage per card, but not with multiple attacks per turn. That's not multiplicative, really. That is just trying to make singular cards worth 4. I have a 2-card hand. I'm going to make it worth 8. I've got a card in Arsenal in the blue. I'm going to make this worth 3 in a Frostbite, 4 damage. You do it, but in slower increments. In the Levia deck, you push that rate on larger and larger hands very consistently. And that's something that even other aggro decks fail to do, because Briar isn't always throwing 0 for 4, 0 for 4, 0 for 4. She stumbles sometimes. And the reality of a recursion Levia deck is you're built to just stop stumbling. So as we move on to the next game here, this is versus Fi. And I think this is something that's going to be really important to pay attention to, and that's because, Hexagore Levia, what's the weakness? The weakness is early damage. If you can't deal early damage, how do you gain a lead to beat aggro decks? Well, I think the reality is you just can't play for taking an early lead. It's just not really possible. So you have to take every smaller hand that Levia has and push its damage to the max it can be. And this is pretty easy because you've got some combos already built in, like Howl from Beyond and Boneyard, 2-card hand for 9, Endless Maw and a blue, 2-card hand for 9. I guess technically the Boneyard is plus a blue, the Howl has to be in banished, but it's all the same, 2-card hand for 9. You've got your Dread Screamers into Gravelings, 3-card hand for 12, Unworldly plus Swing Big, 3-card hand for 12. Those are your smaller hands, and they're not reliant on the later game phases of Double Howl and Hexagore that really bring everything else to bear. You're not going to play for those unless they come up as the game progresses. Just focus on what you can do with smaller hands and make that as broken as possible. And the other cute thing you can do against Fi is abuse Deadwood Rumbler. So this game was actually pretty lucky because I was able to just cast out a Howl, right? Just get that recursion piece going, and then my first interactable hand here is going to be a Deadwood Rumbler. So I'll be able to play this hopefully hit, and since I don't even have Blood Debt yet, I'm going to go ahead and banish the Phoenix Flame. So this is pretty much the best thing that can happen into this matchup, but I am still 10 life behind, right? This is only my turn 2. All I ate was 1 turn out of the fight, and I'm already 10 behind, and I'm only throwing 6. Now, I'm going to take away his Phoenix Flame. That feels pretty huge, but that doesn't really take me closer to winning the game. That's going to have to come with how I craft these later turns of damage. So it's a really interesting one, and truly, I really enjoyed this game. I think the aggro matches are a huge skill test for the Hexagore player because it's up to you to win. You're not immediately favored in these scenarios. Like, there's just no way. But you need to put the effort in to recognizing the phases of your game plan and just coming out on top, because eventually your damage is better than an aggro deck. It really is. It just won't be that way from out the gate. So abuse your openings, abuse whatever interaction you can have to actually punish aggro decks like a Fi deck, right? Just be smart when you're blocking. Now, this isn't a Mask of Momentum build, which is actually a little bit worse for us. We're better at blocking Mask of Momentum because we want to sack larger parts of our hand. Into the combo Fi, we have the ability to just get absolutely blown out. So I'm always on edge of that, right? I'm always on edge of their insane damage turn. So I want to be smart with how I'm conserving my hand, but I also don't want to just waste my good rates. And that's what you see with how I'm blocking around here. So the best rate I can really pull off with this hand is being able to throw Unworldly Bellow into Boneyard Marauder. That's going to be a 3-card hand for 10 damage, which is, a little bit better than normal, right? A 3-card hand, you would assume, deals around 3 per card. Ideally, a 3-card hand out of the Levia deck is going to be 12 damage, so it's not perfect for what we can do, but it's a little bit better than we would expect out of another deck. The other benefit here is that it's going to banish our Howl from Beyond, and it's going to give us graveyard control and actually ramp us up to 6 Blood Debt as early as our turn 3. So that means Hexagore is going to start working its way into our turn cycles and our decisions here, which is actually really early. I mean, it's really early for this to take place. Turn 3 is pretty much the earliest it can be, considering you need to have banished 6 cards with Blood Debt to start considering a Hexagore as like a non-factor damage-wise. So the other part of that turn cycle is recognizing Endless Maw is worth more than just 3 life. If I use it to block 3, then I'm getting 3 value out of that card. But that's a card that if I'm able to play it on a 2-card hand to come in for 9 damage, I'm turning it into being worth 4.5 damage per card. So unless I am just, presented with lethal or presented with an insane hit effect that just can't go through, there's no way I'm just throwing out an Endless Maw there, even though it gives a little bit of safety net to my graveyard and saves a little bit more HP early game. That's just not going to be the right choice. And, we ate a bit more damage for that choice. We're already down to 18 into the face of this big turn coming out of the 5-player. The 5-players actually hit it really well so far. Even though I banished the Phoenix Flame, they had an early start with a full value Lava Burst into another turn here that's a full value Lava Burst. To be fair, banishing Phoenix Flame was a huge deal here because it prevented a Spreading Flames trigger and a Shuko trigger coming from this as well. So effectively 3 damage saved there from that banish, which is huge. I can't understate that. That's a little lucky. It's true. But now we've unlocked a really good turn for ourselves. And we're going to go ahead and roll Scabs here because the Graveling in Arsenal is probably going to be used on ideally like a Dread Screamer hand, right? So in that hand, it's worth 4 damage per card. But if we can turn that into a Hexagore swing right now, that is worth 6 damage. That one card becomes 6 damage. So you can see it really is a math game with Levia, and it's simple math too. I mean, you're not counting on like crazy pouncing links activations and like, just chaining spreading flames and Art of Wars. Like, no, we're not that big of a combo deck, but we're about squeezing value from our small hands. And we get that here. We get our Endless Maw off. We're turning 2 cards into 4.5 damage. We're turning that 1 Graveling into 6 damage. And all of a sudden, even with a full block out of the 5, because their hand was just not really playable, we equalize the turn. That's insane. That is actual insanity. Now, one of the things here that comes up, and I didn't realize it at the time, is I actually was short on Graveyard. That's something that the 5-player also played really smartly there. Their turn wasn't very good, but they also didn't keep even a measly 1 card just to swing something back at us so that we were able to fill the graveyard. So they tried to force our hand a bit, show us that we had the graveyard fill. And in reality, the only way we could do it is break Gamblers, and we were rewarded with that Gambler's hit, to be fair. We rolled a 3. I mean, you can break it on a 3 if you want. Normally you save it for 1. I'm in a forced position here to break it, and I do happen to hit a 4. A bit lucky, but also the 5-player forced me in that position. So good on them, like truly good on them, because that could have gone way different. So with this choice now, I've got the 3 cards I need in Graveyard. It's the Howl, there's the 6 in there, the Endless Maw from last turn. So what I need to focus on is not getting too dumb with it. I'm not just going to play like, Howl Ghostly. That turn's never going to work, right? I need to put a 6 in my graveyard. Like that has to be part of my turn cycle. So that happens first, right? We just get that out of the way. The Boneyard needs to go to the graveyard. We can also now go ahead and get 2 extra cards in the graveyard. We already know that the 5-player isn't blocking out, which maybe made this play a little bit better, but regardless, we're turning another card pitched here instead of into Hexagore into 7 damage from that Ghostly Howl that we had in Banished. So we're turning 1 card there into 7 damage. That's even better than our last turn. That's insane. We turned 1 blue into 7 damage. Like no other deck does that. There's literally, I mean, the only other deck that can pull that off, right, is a Bolton that has 3 cards in Soul and just plays a Celestial as a 1-card hand for 7. And we just did that on the back of paying another resource for the Boneyard and oh my god, Boneyard, what was it? Plus Howl, yeah, duh. So we paid 1 resource for that, right? That was already, or 1 blue for that, 1 card for that. That was already coming in for 9 damage on our turn. Then we turned 1 more card into 7 damage. So that's just how you start adding all these things together and really pump value out of a recursion deck. And man, this is making me too excited because honestly, I stumbled explaining that whole thing. But I think y'all get it, right? Y'all get it. That's just impressive to watch. It just is. Because look at how the life is now. Look at the life. How does the 5-player come back from this? How do they? I still have 3 block left. I have an arsenal set up. And that arsenal is a dominate arsenal as well. That is, I mean, they just don't win. If I can get their armor down, then a measly 6 dominate will close the game. So I have great inevitability showing on my end. And I also have guaranteed ways to just not miss Blood Debt for at least the next 2 turn cycles, even off of just 2-card hands. Because I've got the Writhing in Arsenal, which at worst case, even if they have armor up, I can play out to turn off Blood Debt. In my hand right now, I have another way to turn off Blood Debt. That's already the 2-turn safety net. It just looks great. And I've even got an extra way to force it by using Crown, right, if something goes wrong. So even though their turn is insane here, they do push. This is a great push on their end to get me back down in lethal range as well. I know that I'm not under threat of dying to something like, a Reckless Swing, or even most likely like a, what's that card? Razor Reflex coming from there, because that'll get telegraphed to a point. They'd have to keep a larger hand from that. And I know that I'm going to force out a lot of their hand pretty early, just from the first attack that I'll show, because it's 10 here. So most likely when I do throw this attack out, I get their whole hand, or at least 3 cards out of it, right? So I go down to 1. And at this point, all my defenses are down. This is a bit of an odd choice as well, because with the way I had to block, there was a situation there where I do just win. If I play the Unworldly and it leaves the 6, then I could then play the Writhing Beasthulk for 10, dominate, and I would just win in that position. But because the 6 was banished, I don't get to do that anymore, and the Writhing Beasthulk comes in and doesn't gain dominate. Didn't banish the 6. I banished the 6 instead on Unworldly Bellow. That's fine, Blood Debt's off. But what it meant is I buy the entire hand out of Fi again. And with a full free hand, and with double Howl set up, I can easily push my turn above what his block could be. Even if his block is 12, right? If every card in his hand blocks 3, which is already a little bit rare for Fi, I know I'm going above 12 this turn. I guess I don't know I'm going above 12, to be fair, because I could get greedy. I could cast double Howl into Endless Maw, try to come in for 15, but then there's the risk that I actually don't banish the 6, and I only come in for 12, and maybe they have exactly 12, and I do just die to that, to be fair. And I don't have Gamblers, so I don't want to just roll Scabs and punt the game that way. So I do have to play it a little bit safer. I can't go for guaranteed above 12. I do just go for the safe 12 and hope that they have a 2-block, and it turns out their entire hand is 2 blocks, and they just lose. Thought this was a great game. Like, honestly, out of all the games I was playing, I had some other games like against Icelanders that were pretty interesting, just because that's a fun matchup for this deck. But that one in particular, I thought was fantastic. Like, a lot of things went well early game, but it's also a lot about capitalization on the early game lead that was gained from, just good sequence of draws. I mean, honestly, that's a lot of it, right? I was able to play out Howl early. I was able to all of a sudden turn on Hexagore by turn 3. I mean, those were just incredible occurrences. But now we're into the Dash matchup, and I included this game because, we saw an aggro game that was really tight, but we did still win. And here's another aggro game that should look a lot worse. It should look a lot worse because Dash should be the premier aggro deck right now. And we are just a deck that is, a little bit slower early game, and Dash is going to absolutely abuse that because their early game is guaranteed to be powerful because they start with items in play. So in this version of the deck, I'm not relying on, Arg Smash. I'm not trying to just fatigue them out. I didn't really enjoy committing my entire sideboard to that game plan. Like, you can definitely do it. If you really want to just beat Dash, and honestly for the ProQuest season coming up, that might be what you have to do. Just bring in tons of blockers in your sideboard, 3 Arg Smash, and just say, we're not playing a game until every single one of your items is gone. You can do that, and you will win. It's actually quite easy, but it's really boring, and it sacrifices some other matchups for you because this deck does need its sideboard. It does really like the options that it can bring into different matchups. So instead, what we see here is me trying to actually outrace a Dash. And funny enough, like, you can do it. Your hands are really good. The issue is you probably don't win this game without a little bit of luck because you don't just get, boost, go again, boost, go again. My God, if Levi had that, she'd be nuts. You do have to rely a little bit into Scab Skins. That's going to be how you unlock a lot of your potential to race, because if all you're doing is throwing one attack that's a good rate, sure, maybe I turn my Unworldly Bellow swing big into 12 damage off 3 cards. That's good, but it's also not accelerating the game fast enough for me to actually win, most likely. So you can already see here as well the power of Pulse Wave Harpoon kind of throwing off what racing does for a match, because I really wanted to craft this hand a little bit better, most likely throw in like a Crown of Providence to help dig for a resource card. But when the Pulse Wave Harpoon there sapped my play, I had to just slow down because I was on all reds and I wasn't able to even throw in Crown of Providence to like evenly block out a Teklo pistol and kind of force some clean exchange of breakpoints there. I don't want to just throw in Crown and make it block 1 off the hope that it draws a resource card. That's banking a lot, right? But I could have done it. I could have thrown in the Crown, sink the Mark of the Beast, and maybe draw blue and go for the Unworldly Swing big. So the Pulse Wave was pretty big. It really was, because it stopped me. It stopped me from having a really good turn, because I got a little bit too scared off of just trading breakpoints efficiently. So all of a sudden my 2-card hand only dealt 4. That's really what you can't afford to do. And that's kind of the hiccup, right? Like, there is interaction now coming from the Dash's side that makes playing perfectly as a, aggressively, as a hero that actually needs to, craft their hands aggressively, but also being tied a little bit to these combo hands, right? When you're reliant on that kind of damage, Pulse Wave Harpoon is just, that is just a terrifying card. So, you just do what you do, right? Like, what can you do when they have everything? That definitely comes up here. Max Velocity, their turn was already going to be bonkers because of the Teklo core in play, because of the Pounder, because of the Hyperdriver. Like, we knew it was going to be great. We didn't know it was going to be that great. But at least now we can return with more good rates on our end. And that's really all going to start here with that Scar for Scar, just a clean 0 for 4. And right here, it might look a little unlucky, right? Like, at first you might see, oh, well, I didn't banish the Ghostly. That was going to be the free, just 1 value thrown in there. But the way we blocked that turn was actually in anticipation of, we're not going to just bank everything on actually banishing Ghostly. That's not super likely with how the graveyard was. Instead, we're just going to turn this hand into ending with a Hexagore Swing, which is actually still a great rate, right? At the end there, we threw our hand in for 16 damage off of 4 cards, which is, still 4 damage per card, which is something Dash matches really well, but we have to do what we can, right? That's all we can do. So another situation arises here where we needed to dig for our blue, so we sacked the crown to do so, and that does come up. So this is good. Two things didn't go super well for us, right? Now something is going a little bit better. We actually got rewarded on the crown block that we were saving it for to do exactly what we needed it to, which was to buy us the resource card we need to stick into the game. But the Dash player is really unrelenting. They've also just had a great opening, and they're slamming us with this pistol. Nothing we can do about it. Funny enough, if we'd even brought in the Arg Smash, that doesn't actually affect their high octane turns like this. So those are always scary no matter what game plan you've got. But for us, we are scared because it's damage. And if it's damage, we want to be the one to present lethal first. And can we really do that from this position where we have 1 armor block left? They have 3 armor block left. Well, the first way to start to get into that trade, a good trade, is going to be to return a 2-card hand for 4.5 damage a card. So the way to make that potentially even better is to try to turn that Art of War, which Art of War actually is pretty valuable. I would normally value Art of War more than just the Hexagore swing, but we're in a position here where I need to be able to present lethal. So we're going to go ahead and roll scabs, and we do hit. Of course, it was a 1, but we're probably in a position where we're never going to get to roll again anyway, so we're fine. We break Gamblers into that extra action point, and we get to turn our 3-card hand now into 15 damage, which is incredible. And it does not exactly present lethal, because they don't have to sack a card here. They were able to block with their equipment, and they can go to 1, and that's fine for them. It's most likely just totally okay, because they don't know it, but we know that we're not running Reckless, and we also know that we're not likely able to keep a 2-card hand to just kill them with the Writhing Beastalk. But funny enough, we did draw the Writhing Beastalk, but we also drew 2 non-blocks. So in a perfect world, we just wouldn't have stumbled in those early turns and actually presented more damage and trapped them to a point where they don't actually present lethal here, probably drawn an extra block here, and then we can just return our 2-card hand, kill them with the Dominate from the Writhing Beastalk. That would have been great. It's not what happened, but either way, I really enjoyed how this game went, and it shows what you can do with the Hexagore deck, even to potentially the best aggro deck in the scene right now. So I hope you enjoyed it, because this was tons of fun.